Hey everybody, welcome to this week's live chat. I'm so glad that you're joining me. We're going to be talking about swirls. Now I'm not going to actually be demoing or quilting any of the swirls out because I have tons of videos and tutorials on that. You can check out previous free motion quilting along, free motion challenge quilting along, which was swirls plus lots of tutorials. But I am going to talk about where to use swirls on your quilt and how you can use them on your quilt and kind of motivate you to give it a shot. So I know that from the chat, when I've been reading what everybody's commenting, some people are a little hesitant about swirls, a little nervous about it. So I'm going to show you just how many things you can do with it and hopefully get you motivated to give it a shot. Or maybe you're already a swirl Jedi. This might give you some quilting inspiration. So looking forward to some fun pictures. Plus, I have a little sneak peek for the very end. I'm going to show you just a real quick glimpse of my newest fabric line that's coming out next week. So without any further ado, let's get to the pictures. So first of all, I've been trying something new. I've been doing a little promo every week to thank you for joining me every week, and this is like a flash sale, and this week's flash sale is going to be on the Scraptastic quilt. So that is the quilt you see right here. I love this because it's a perfect way to practice a lot of different sashing designs or border designs. Those 2-inch strips are perfect for it. So all you have to do is go to the description box below. There's a link, click on it, and use the promo code LIVECHAT20. I'll show you what it looks like here in a second. And you can take 20% off the Scraptastic quilt kit or the patterns. So that's all it's good for, not the whole website. I'm not that nice, maybe one day. But the Scraptastic quilt kit features a jelly roll by Jennifer Sampu, her Sky collection, as well as some beautiful blenders to go with that. And it was featured on an episode of The Midnight Quilter, so you can see how it comes together. Or you can grab the pattern if you have an abundance of scraps. It's a great way to use them up since it uses the 2.5-inch strips. So, plus I designed the pattern, so I think it's pretty cool. But again, you can get 20% off that for a limited time while supplies last or until next live chat. So better get on that if you want it. But let's talk about swirls, all right? As I was laying in bed last night, it sounds weird, I think about quilting when I'm laying in bed, I remembered the ad from back in the 90s. Remember the Incredible Edible Egg? I don't know why my mind went there, but I was like, oh, it's kind of like the Incredible Versatile Swirl. So that's what I'm going to do, show you just how many ways you can use the swirls on your quilt. Now, we're going to start with the Scraptastic quilt because it's Scraptastic, and in it, I used it in some of the strips and borders. So it does fit those irregular shapes. If you look in some of those diagonals, you'll see the swirl kind of filling that area. Since I can change up the spacing between the lines, I can make it as small or as large as I want, and using it in those irregular areas is a really great way to practice it. So if you're a little nervous about trying it as an all over, one thing you can do is try it within a defined space. It kind of gives you a clear start and stop, lets you know like, okay, I've quilted it, now I can move on. So it might be a good little project for you. Now, when I was going through all my pictures, which was really fun to kind of take a walk down the quilting memory lane of my life, the first way that you could use swirls, or the first way I started using swirls was as an all over design. So over the whole quilt or over large areas of the quilt. This is especially the case if I'm dealing with busy fabrics. You can't hardly see the swirls that are in those blue triangles or in that creamy white background. That fabric is so busy, I might as well do something fast and quick since you can't see the quilting anyway. Or on the opposite side, I could use that busy fabric to practice new designs. But for the most part, I'm going to do a nice big swirl in that area. It's kind of funny because sometimes quilters will ask, well, how dense should the quilting be? And I'm thinking, well, it depends on how much I want, the quilting to show up or how much you're going to see it. So if you're making quilts with all that kaffe fabric that's bright and bold, swirls are great. You're probably not going to see the quilting anyway, so you can do whatever you want in there. And here's a little close-up of that big old swirl. I mean, those lines are probably, I don't know, ½ inch apart. Now, let's just be honest, that is all relative. That's a big old swirl for me because I like to quilt super tiny, but you can use it as a background or a filler. And I'm trying to advance and it's not letting me advance. Hold on a second. All right. Again, if I want to use it as an all over the whole area, I definitely can, but I can use it as a filler around other things. And this is really how I tend to use it the most. I had tons and tons and tons of pictures of these. If I want the quilting to really show off an element, like the side of the feather here, I'll quilt it really small. Or if I want it to be a little subtle, I'll quilt it a little bit bigger. And so here I'm just quilting it around that feather just to kind of give it a different look. Now what about border strips and sashings? Now we already kind of saw this with the Scraptastic quilt, but again, this is perfect for those 2-inch strips. 2-inch strips are larger. I wouldn't try fitting it into a much smaller strip because it's just hard to have room to let that form. But as you can see in that lime green kind of mottled fabric, that swirl hook fits in there really nicely. And if I have a tendency to hold my breath when trying a new design, I can't necessarily pass out after quilting just 3 of those swirls, right? It kind of gives me a break. So try it in those areas. Now, if you're working on a sampler quilt, sometimes those can be a little overwhelming, right? Because there's so many different blocks, so many different options. You get what I call design fatigue. Well, one thing you can do is identify something as the background and quilt the same design in all of it, right? It's going to take away part of the quilt and give you less to worry about. So in sampler quilts, swirls are usually my go-to design for that. That's because they fit all sorts of irregular shapes and areas, and I can kind of scale them up or down depending on how much room I have. And here, this was for our first year of Build a Quilt, our Block of the Month program. I used swirls in the backgrounds of the blocks. So even though they were triangles, I could still fit them in there pretty well and then keep moving on to the next one. So sampler quilts, all over designs, and again, nice and big in backgrounds. So a question that was asked on the chat, the text chat before we started was, I was wondering if you could use a swirl as an all-over design. Absolutely. Any meander or any meandering design can be used as an all-over, and you can scale it up or down depending on how dense you want the quilting to be. I also love that curvy look of swirls, especially in fabrics like this, which is a linen. It just has a lovely texture and really kind of, I don't know, looks great. Now, I guess I have to say, I've never seen a quilt that wouldn't look good quilted with swirls. So that's just my opinion there. Again, when you have those quilts with weird irregular areas or fillers or background areas that aren't quite, normal shaped or repetitive, using swirls is a great way because not only is it going to smash down whatever it's around, it's going to help you maneuver your way around the area. So if you watch any of my swirl tutorials, I talk about using echoing to maneuver around and get to different areas, and that's definitely what I'm doing here, using that echoing to get where I need to go so that I can continue on. That's going to allow me to go from block to block to block without having to stop and cut thread. Not that it's the end of the world, but it's just one of those weird things I have. I don't like to break thread. I like to keep going, keep going. All right, so again, more background here. In the blue triangle block with a light blue background and the dark blue, I just love how it has a nice contrast with geometric shapes. Now, I want to be careful with this because I'm not saying if your quilt has geometric shapes that you have to use swirls. I think you quilt whatever you want. I don't know that there's any certain rule on that. What I'm saying is if I'm already using something geometric, like dot-to-dot quilting, using something with a nice contrast is going to just help separate those two. So swirls, pair very nicely with geometric dot-to-dot quilting, especially if it's in the background, especially if it's kind of, smashing part of it down to let the other part come up. Now, you can take this as far as you want. You can really shrink down those swirls like I've done here in those hexagons. I mean, those are pretty small. Of course, this is not for every quilt or every person, but when you do want to make a statement, quilting those swirls nice and small is really going to help make whatever is around it pop out. Now to do that, I'm just taking that spacing between the lines and pushing it closer together and quilting teeny, 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 tiny. But you can take that and decide if you like the look of that or not. One thing I love to do is to use the swirl as an all-over, but also as a way to highlight elements of the fabric. So we've already talked about highlighting feathers or other designs. Here in this fabric that's Tula Pinks, I love the little fruit. And so I thought, I'm gonna quilt the swirls so that they wrap around the fruit, but don't go over them. That just helps separate them from the filler and kind of helps them pop out a little bit. If this wasn't my favorite fabric, or let's say it wasn't as cute as it is, maybe I wouldn't do that, but definitely a way to show off parts of the quilt that you want to show off. So let's pretend you're quilting a piece of fabric that has, we'll just say dots, but random color dots, and your favorite color is one of these colors. You can do it around those and then quilt over the rest of it. So you can kind of pick and choose, what you want to show off. Now, if you're newer to machine quilting, you might be thinking, yeah, right, I don't know that I can even string a couple swirls together. This is going to be definitely something that you want to try after you're comfortable with maneuvering your way around the area. And again, as a filler in the background, we have these beautiful pineapples. I did some kind of leaves that went through there, but then swirls. So those two center pineapple have swirls around it, but they look a little bit longer. Notice they're a little bit more elongated with more echoing. Might look a little different, but same idea. I'm still quilting my swirl and echoing. I'm just adding more echo lines before I move on. Now the reason I might use this is I find it's a little quicker sometimes to quilt, or maybe I just kind of get into the mood where I want something a little bit more elongated. Ultimately, it doesn't matter. You know what I'm going to say because I say it all the time. As long as the whole area is filled in completely, it's going to look great. But, you know, sometimes I switch it up. Longer swirls, shorter swirls, whichever feels good. Now let's talk about borders. So when you're thinking through border designs, swirls might not be the first thing that come to mind, but it is definitely one that I love. Again, in those 2 to 4 inch borders, and you can really scale it up to large borders. And I have an example of that here in a second. The Swirl Hook design is one that has stumped quilters over the years. It's so great if you can get the hang of it. And I have a tutorial that shows you how to do it, in fact, several. But if you're struggling with the Swirl Hook, quilting it within a border and kind of giving yourself a repetition to follow might make it a little bit easier. Again, having that defined area, having that number of steps to follow just really appeals to some quilters. So if you're having trouble with a swirl, again, try quilting it within a defined area, get the hang of that, and then try the meander. Okay, so last week in my borders discussion, we talked about how I quilted borders and how I work my way around. And when I was looking for swirls, I found this series of pictures, which I was like, yay, past Angela did a great job taking pictures of these. So if you're newer to quilting swirls or any design, just know that you can do this. You don't have to remember exactly what I'm doing here, but if you've ever tried to join your design to make it look continuous, this is going to show you how I do that. So this elongated swirl chain, which we learned in the last free motion challenge as well as the Swirls free motion challenge, is great because I work my way across the border and I work my way down, but something I don't really get a chance to talk about is how do I make them group together at the end, because eventually they're going to join together. How do I make that look seamless, or how do I make it look like it's not just 2 of them running into each other? So I have my 2 swirl chains here. This is where they're meeting. The first thing you're going to do is give yourself a couple of inches of space. I don't want to butt them up to each other, right next to each other. I want to give it a little bit of space because I'm going to use echoing to hook them together. So that's where I'm at right here. 2 swirl chains. I'm over. Now I'm ready to start hooking them together. So my first move is going to be to come around the first one and go to the opposite side of the other one. So I was on the top of the other one, and I came around and then hooked into there. So that line is kind of the joining line of the 2. Having it go from one side to the other just kind of helps confuse the eye a little bit. When I start echoing it, it becomes not as obvious as what's happening. And then once I have that line done, I'm going to start echoing that side of it. So there's my line. I'm at the bottom side of those swirls, so I'm going to echo and fill in that area. Here's an example. I cut thread so you can kind of see what that looks like. So I quilted around, came back and echoed, and now I'm just going to echo, 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 and fill it in. So that's all I've done right there. Now that echoing is just going to help build it up. It makes it look, consistent with the rest of it. And then I'm going to do the same on the other side. So here I've started adding those echo lines on the top, filling in that whole area, and then I've joined the 2 swirls, and it's not super noticeable. One thing I will say, and I overthink quilting, I know it, it's okay. When I go to join those swirls, I try not to join it in the center of the border or too close to the corner. I try to do it around the 1/3 mark. I don't know why. I think that people tend to look at the center and the corners first, so hiding it over there seems to make a little more sense to me. And then more echo lines, keep going, and then it's done. So if you've ever wanted to join 2 swirls, you just saw in a nutshell how that's done. Also, this is a pretty large border. I think it's like 5 or 6 inches. So if I want to quilt swirls in those areas, all I'm going to do is keep echoing or add more swirls, just keep filling in the area. Again, you can check out the swirl videos I have. It will talk a little bit more about that. All right, let's see some other ways to use swirls. I really had to cut down my number of pictures. Turns out I use this design a lot. So this quilt that I did for a book with Tula Pink shows how I use swirls as a filler, but also as like a focal element, kind of like that swirl chain that we just saw. So in the light pink, again, quilting those swirls nice and small, nice and dense to really make the echoing pop. And then, a little bit of echoing around the piecing, I think just adds a nice look and doesn't take that much longer to do. So that in that area, and then the swirl chain in the corner. Now you can also use swirls as a motif. Now this is kind of getting a little bit more, custom, a little bit more in depth, but just know that we can take a basic swirl, we can quilt it as a big all over, but then we can start making all these little changes to it. And here I've quilted some of those elongated swirls so that they come out from the center, some wrap up here, and kind of creates this motif. Now, if you're wondering, did I mark out the designs beforehand? I didn't. So I'm actually aiming for symmetrical. So if you look real closely, you'll see that one, elongated swirl is a little bit wider than the other one sticks out a little bit further, but the fact that they're both symmetrical makes it look perfect, right? So where I have one swirl go up over here, I'll have one go up on the other side, and where this one faces down, this one will face down. So when you're quilting, don't stress out so much about perfection, aim for symmetry, especially when it comes to these motifs, and it will look golden. Now let's talk about using swirls in blocks. So you can use them in smaller blocks, especially pointed ones. So diamonds are great, and I'll show you some other examples here in a second. But I really love the swirl hook here because it fills in that pointed area, but also brings you back to where you started. So if you're working on a Lone Star quilt or something with a lot of repetitive smaller blocks, quilting a swirl in each of them is a nice way to go about it. And here it's hard to see, but those triangles in the center, another example of using that swirl hook in triangles instead of the diamond, and you still get that nice effect. Now it doesn't necessarily work as well in squares or shapes that are a little bit, squat or square, but you could quilt just one swirl. So this is something that I like to do in the center of a block or the center of an area to really draw attention to it, or if I'm just at a loss for what to quilt in that area. Now here's the one thing to watch out for though. It's really hard to quilt one big swirl. So this isn't going to be something I do in large blocks, but this particular block was about, 2 or 3 inches on point, and I knew that it would be a quick and easy way to quilt it, and probably by that time I just was running out of ideas, so I thought I'll just do that. And again, as a background, but also if you want to create secondary effects. So this particular quilt, I quilted for Alex Anderson, just stunning in the color placement, loved it. And then up close, you can see where I'm using those swirls kind of as a secondary effect. I have just regular swirls towards the top, and then I have my swirl chain, and then some wishbones. I wanted to create some kind of border-like effect with that design. So adding repetition, adding direction will really help you create some really neat secondary designs. Sometimes you'll be surprised. You'll think, oh, it looks really cool. I wasn't even trying to do that. Other times you might plan ahead. Either way, it's lots of fun. Now, swirls are also one of the most friendly quilting designs. They really play well nicely with other designs, and it's a great way to combine and create different effects. And I know that we talked about that during the live free motion challenge that we just did, the flora and foliage. And so combining it with other designs is a great way to create even more design options, even more of a custom look. Combine it with other circular shapes or other leaves. I mean, really, there isn't much it doesn't pair well with. Again, it's the incredible versatile swirl. And here we can see I've got some, swirls, some paisleys, a few wishbones. I mean, as long as you fill in the whole area and you don't leave any gaps, it's going to look great. Then, if you want to take it even to the next level and go over the top, I know we've seen this before during our live chats, but it's one of my favorites. Quilting those swirls and then kind of putting a pebble in the middle is a great way to create, again, a different texture and a neat secondary effect. So I'm using that swirl to extend out, quilting that pebble, and then just echoing the heck out of it. That's going to help me create direction or, like I said, different effects and textures. Plus, it's really quick to quilt. And it combines so nicely with the crosshatch. Now, crosshatch quilting is not my thing. It's really hard to freehand crosshatch and make it look right. As soon as one line gets off, it's going to be looking very noticeably off. But doing little bits of crosshatching is pretty easy, right? Just fill in this little area and move on, and I don't have to hook them into each other. Now, this is a little bit next level, but basically I use the swirls to kind of create an area. I filled it in and then moved on. I thought about doing a tutorial on it, but man, there's a lot of traveling. I don't know if it'd be super easy, but it's just a nice effect. So you can combine it with other designs and use it to break up areas and make them a little bit more manageable. And here is another example of secondary effects in between those two stars, quilting that, swirl chain or those elongated swirls just to kind of group it together and give it a neat look. And I know you all have seen this, but it's hard. I have favorite quilts. It's kind of like, I know I'm not supposed to love one quilt more than the others, but we all know I have my favorites. And this one, the Cathedral quilt from the Midnight Quilter, is a perfect example. So secondary effects, quilting that swirl chain, which is just elongated swirls echoed and built up a little bit bigger, but also the swirls as the filler. So in here, I'm just quilting it along the corners. I love the effects that you can get that are really easy and quick comparatively to, having to mark it out and make it look perfect. And then just another example of it. So instead of trying to wrap that thing all the way around the quilt, I just put it on the corners so it could just stop and then move on. And then, of course, from Flora and Foliage, that challenge that we just had, those swirl chains, we can quilt them in rows, we can fill in between with other designs. You can really have a lot of cool effects with it. So, those secondary designs, anything like that. Well, let me switch back on over here. So that's just a quick little show and tell when it comes to where to put swirls on your quilt. I know that sometimes deciding what to put where can be harder than actually quilting it. So hopefully it's given you some ideas or some inspiration to try out. Now I have some questions I'm going to answer that came up in the chat. Jessica has been writing down questions for me, which is awesome. And then I'll give you a little sneak peek. Thank you, ma'am. Lots of questions. Okay, Jean said, I can never get the swirls to look good. Now that wasn't really a question, but I felt it was something to talk about. If you go back and watch the Swirls Free Motion Challenge, or even the swirl portion of the Flora and Foliage Challenge, I talk a lot about how swirls just need to kind of develop, right? So you quilt your swirl and every time you do it, it just kind of gets a little bit better and a little bit better and a little bit better. So practice is key. I mean, truly, but also trusting that once you fill in all the areas, it's going to look fine. So if you're still struggling with it, get a quilt, get a yard piece of fabric, quilt swirls out over the whole thing, and I bet by the time you're done, you feel much more comfortable with it. Just too often we quilt a couple on a sample piece, get frustrated and quit. And we really have to kind of get through that. I read somewhere it's called embracing the suck. You have to embrace the suck to get to the good stuff. So just know that it's going to be a learning curve, but then you embrace that suck, you get past it, and you have fun with it. Rebecca says she practices on smaller pieces. How can she get out of that stage? Well, you either need to get somebody that's going to come over and say, hey, you need to quilt this. A little bit of peer pressure always gets things done. Or give yourself a challenge. Say, I'm going to go a little bit bigger than I normally do. So I'm not saying to go from a fat quarter to a king size. That's no fun. But maybe you just make it a little bit bigger each time. It's important to practice on a little bit bigger pieces because you can quilt a swirl right here, but how are you going to handle it when you have all that fabric? It's kind of like weightlifting, right? I can always hold these little weights, but when I get to the bigger ones, I need to work up to it. So hopefully that helps. And this was not a question either, but it's so good. Leonore said that I make quilting look so easy. And I was like, well, here's the thing. If I made it look difficult, you wouldn't want to learn it, right? You'd be like, that looks hard and not fun. And I've practiced, right? I've been doing this for a couple of days, a couple of years, a long time. I promise it is easy once you get the hang of it. It's just hard to get past that first learning curve. So I make it look easy because it is once you get the hang of it. Okay, using the swirls for the quilting, is it still puffy? From Diane. So that has to do with density, right? Like this is a common topic. If I quilt the swirl so small, will it be too stiff, too hard to, cuddle with? And maybe at first, but as you use the quilt, as it softens up, as it gets loved on, it's going to get that nice drape. If you're worried about that, going with a natural fiber batting like cotton or wool will give you that nice drape right off the bat. But I wouldn't worry too much about it because the more you break it in, the better it gets. Plus, you can also make them less dense. So it's totally up to you, up for the effect that you're going for. So you can still keep the quilt puffy and just do swirls. Totally up to you. How do you do that mitered border look around a shape without breaking thread? So, oh yes, I know what you're talking about. So like if I have my square and I kind of come in here, So do you see that mitered borders? Those are just my seams to get in. So since I come in on one, I'm echoing my side, but when I'm in each other corner, I'm gonna do the same thing. If that doesn't make sense, I'll throw in a picture next week and I'll talk about that a little bit more, Joanne. It's a good question because that's a good design to add a little bit of a secondary pattern, but it's so easy. Are my designs done on a long arm or regular sewing machine from Anne? Yes, they're done on both. So I do have a long arm and I quilt on the sewing machine. It just depends on the size of the project and whether I'm filming or not. Sometimes I might have a quilt on the long arm frame, and so I'm like, oh, I don't want to do that one, so I quilt on my sewing machine. But I like to say that I'm bilingual in quilting machines. I can do it on both. Have I ever quilted on a vintage treadle machine? No, and I don't, that's a whole nother level there to have to treadle and move your hands. I don't know, that would be an interesting challenge. I would think that'd be fun to try. So hopefully that answers your questions about swirls. I'm so glad you joined me for this chat. Next week, we're gonna talk about layered quilting. So I'm gonna show you some examples from that challenge. It was just a little mini challenge and it kind of was a few years ago, but it's a fun technique where you quilt, you cut away and reveal the fabric underneath, and it's a fun art technique and a really fun way to practice machine quilting. So I want to reiterate real quick for those of you that want to take advantage of the promo code, it's LiveChat20, and the link is in the description box below. Again, that's for the Scraptastic Quilt Kit or patterns only, and it's while supplies last or until the next live chat, so you can definitely check that out. Now, how about a sneak peek? Next, a week from Saturday, only 9 days from now, is our Quilt Walk, our annual big event that we do here in downtown Liberty, Missouri, where the shops participate, they hand out block patterns, and then we have the finishing instructions. The pattern is written exclusively for the event by me. It's quite the undertaking, and my crew have been just working so hard to get ready for it, so I cannot wait to host it. If you're in the area or coming through, I hope that you'll stop by. It's a fun thing, but don't worry if you're not, we'll make some stuff available for you afterwards. But I designed a brand new fabric collection for the Quilt Walk quilt, and this is called Stroll, and it's a little different for me, right? It has the greens and the navies, a little bit of a corally orange, fun little blenders, but man, these colors right here, the blue and the green, those are my colors. I love those. And even a little gold and a little orange. So this is Stroll, is the name of the fabric collection, and it's gonna be available next week, but you get to see it first because you join me for the live chats. So definitely be checking out the website around then, but I'm super excited, like a proud mama. All right, everybody, it looks like it's very, very hot in most parts of the world or the US. I hope everybody stays cool and has a great week, and I'll be back next Thursday, which will only be 2 days before the Quilt Walk, but I'll be calm as a cucumber to be fine, where we're gonna talk about layered quilting. So until then, I hope you all have a great week and